Have the Gnostics cornered the market on Q-tips? Find out on this Talk Gnosis. Hello and welcome to Talk Gnosis for September 11th, 2013. I'm Father Tony Silviu, and we have some news for everybody today. We've had a couple of weeks off, as you've probably noticed, or maybe you haven't, I don't know. And we're pleased to announce that we're back. We've got some new technology. We're going to be bigger and better and have a better show now. And in order to do that, I have recruited some help, and I'm going to introduce you now to our two brand new hosts. You won't be seeing my ugly mug every week, but I'll be back here behind the scenes pushing the buttons. Without further ado, let me introduce you to Bishops Ken Canterbury and Bishop Lainie Petersen. Hello.
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 All right, so you guys are going to be our new host for Talk Gnosis.
Very excited about it.
Extremely excited.
All right, and yeah, I think we'll forego the introductions for this time because I want to jump right into it. Tonight we're going to be talking about 2 Timothy chapter 4. There's some interesting Gnostic-y stuff in there, and this was a topic that you guys picked. So I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to let you do your thing, and we'll see how it goes. All right?
Fantastic.
All right. Good show, guys.
Bishop Petersen, do you have 2 Timothy 4 open?
I certainly do. So why don't I have a look at it? We're
Okay.
going to go 2 Timothy chapter 4, starting with verse 3. For the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths. But you, keep your head in all situations, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, and discharge all the duties of your ministry.
Interesting few verses, as you're well aware. I mean, those verses are used quite frequently, especially, I think, from the evangelicals towards Gnostics, but not only just Gnostics. They use that towards Catholics and towards those who don't believe exactly what their thoughts and their kind of theology and philosophy is. But it's not just the evangelicals. I see this phrases of the Bible being used almost towards any group when you have a difference of opinion.
Yep. It's what I call a clobber passage. It's something that people will use when somebody is saying something that they don't like, or to attack or rebuke another organization or group or faction or denomination. Or religion. They will use this passage in particular to say, well, you're just you're telling people what they want to hear. And the only reason you have followers is because you are giving them that scratch for their itching ears, and they're following you because you're reinforcing what they already believe or need or want to hear to justify their own sinful desires or behaviors.
Right. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion in, I think sometimes in the meaning and intent of what Paul had to say, even though we may even question, was Paul even the authorship of 2 Timothy? I mean, there's a lot of theological debate. Was he the author? Was it one of his disciples? Was it some other member of the early church?
Yeah.
Elaine Pagels in her Gnostic Paul, puts a lot of supporting evidence that she puts that Paul very much kind of favored Gnosticism, and she even takes many passages from Paul that are sometimes used to kind of look at Gnosticism kind of negatively, and she kind of flips it around. I don't know if I necessarily agree with all of her opinions, but I do think that she puts some interesting points out there. Sure. When I look at any scripture, whether it be the ones that have been canonized by the church, whether it is the Gnostic scriptures, I try to look at them from a perspective of history, of kind of anthropology, what was kind of going on at the time. I think you have to have a little bit of knowledge, at least, of language and what their intent was.
Sure.
And without looking at all of those things, I think sometimes things definitely get lost. One of the arguments is that Paul was kind of charging at the kind of what would be called the proto-Gnostics, kind of the early Gnostic sects. Mm-hmm. And that because he was kind of preaching to the Gentiles, and Timothy was his follower, he was basically kind of trying to set them straight. Listen, you kind of got to get rid of the things that the Gentiles are saying, because many of them were talking in philosophies that were extremely influenced by Platonic thought. And the Greeks really had kind of this idea of, let's set around a debate. Let's debate things. And that really wasn't kind of the method that the Jews of that time, who were used to going to the temple and their normal religious practice, was. So if he was addressing kind of proto-Gnostics and Gnostic thought, where do you think he was going with that?
You know, I having read I actually went back and read the book, and I was reading a book or a letter from a very frustrated man. He had been jailed. He had had several people, former disciples, who had turned on him, mm-hmm. and his concern was first of all that he was facing a lot of oppression from different factions and teachers, but also he wanted to encourage the recipient of the letter, Timothy. He wanted to encourage Timothy to fight the good fight, persevere in his duties, and to not allow the fact that people are going to do what they're going to do. People are going to follow what they want, follow teachers that are going to speak to their own peculiarities. And he was trying to get Timothy not to be distracted about that, not to be distracted by that, and to continue to fulfill his own vocation. So I think that was a lot of what Paul was trying to do here. For my own self, when we encountered this passage a few weeks ago in a discussion group that we are both in. Somebody brought up this passage and said, what do you guys think of it? Do you think it speaks to modern Gnostics? And there was some discussion. And for me, it actually caused me to pause. Because, of course, I am going to gravitate to teachings and philosophies and teachers that teach the things that I want to hear. And there's always that real risk in any sort of religious or spiritual process where we are going to gravitate to something that's going to keep us comfortable or that's going to reinforce our worst faults. So it caused me to do some self-examination. Why am I here? Why have I chosen to accept certain teachings and disregard others? And I can even look back in my own history. Why did that teaching at that time make so much sense to me? Why did I follow it? Well, there were other things going on in my life that corresponded to that. I don't know if that's been your experience or not, though.
Oh, absolutely. Myself, I was raised in a very evangelical Protestant upbringing. I was raised Pentecostal. And Pentecostals have a very kind of narrow focus on what they believe. And growing up, I had always questioned what I was being taught. It just didn't make sense to me. There wasn't much logic. And as I grew into my teen years, I started gravitating into things kind of esoteric, and then which eventually led me to Gnosticism, into the French Gnostic traditions and Martinism and many of the things that kind of influenced me to the person that I am today. But it was a big change for me coming from kind of a spirituality of Pentecostalism to something that within the French Gnostic traditions were very formalized, very ritualistic. And for those who maybe came from Roman Catholic backgrounds or from Episcopalian backgrounds or even Orthodoxy backgrounds, maybe that transition wouldn't have seemed as extreme. But for me, it seemed very foreign at the time. Now, I kind of look back and I don't understand those who don't get the sacraments and who don't understand kind of the beauty of ritual and everything that is imparted by that. So in many ways, I would say, yes, that, I was very much drawn into things that kind of spoke to my own nature. But I think that is true almost for anyone in almost any faith. I mean, I talk to my friends who are Catholic, and I talk to my friends who are Protestant, and I talk to my friends who are Wiccan, and they all seem to be kind of drawn into that spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
I've always said it is better for us, and it's kind of paraphrasing Thomas Merton, but it is better for us to find the things that kind of unite us than the things that divide us.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means for us finding the things where God makes it manifest to us and speaks to our own inner self, I'm all for that. I can't tell you what is going to be your correct path of spiritual enlightenment. I can't tell you what's going to bring you to Gnosis. I can only tell you where I have been, the road that I have traveled. And maybe sometimes we walk together on that road. Maybe sometimes we're separate on that road. But I only know what's really kind of works for me. And I know that, our Gnostic traditions is what works for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it also speaks deeply within my soul and within my being. Does that approach fit everyone? No, I don't think it's kind of a one size fits all. So I can understand where maybe the early Christians and even modern Christians kind of look at this and, they kind of say, well, you're kind of drawn into the things that to you, but does that necessarily make that a false teaching? I guess that's where the debate is.
Yeah.
Maybe that is a topic for a later show, but, is there in spirituality, is there something that is purely objective truth? Or is everything purely subjective?
And that's a very important question, because if you believe that there is one creator of the universe who is worthy of worship and honor, and who set up a certain order to the universe, one would probably want to worship that creator according to the rules that creator has established. Now, the problem, of course, is that nobody seems to be able to agree on that. And if you look at the state, for example, of American evangelicalism, even, that's one relatively small branch of Christianity that has so many different churches, so many different denominations. And so for me, you think we talked about this last week. If somebody were to come up to me in a coffee shop and say, "Well, you're on this esoteric path. I'm in the Baptist church down the street, and you're just following after silly myths, and you're just doing this because you have itching ears and you want to hear what you want to hear what you want to hear." And of course, my response is, "Why did you choose your myth?" And
Right.
we could start having that discussion.
Right.
And if the person is willing to be honest with themselves, they can perhaps have some insight and say, well, I chose this, or I became a Christian in this church, or I chose to go to this church because I liked what I was hearing at this church. Okay, well, at this point, we're kind of equal.
Right.
At that point, we're going to have to then start to discuss, well, is there any evidence for your beliefs? Do your beliefs make any sense? What are the consequences of your beliefs? And we can start from there. But I think that we need to acknowledge that that all of us, particularly in countries where where faith is a choice, where religion is a choice, we need to be able to admit that at some point we made a decision to follow this because it touched something in us, and then we responded to that. And what it touched in us may or may not be a positive or good thing. So our faith may be a projection of our own brokenness in some ways. It can be a dysfunction.
And I would agree. I think many times Americans have a very narrow-minded view on what the faith, and especially if we're talking specifically Christianity, what Christianity looks like. Because we only know it from our own perceptions and maybe what we're exposed to. And you touched on this briefly last week, but if you look at Christianity throughout the world, it is practiced much differently throughout the world than it really is here in the United States. And if we look at the church before the Great Schism and even before, they were kind of pretty much united in one faith. It wasn't until the Great Schism and then later, kind of the revolt of the Protestants that we started seeing a lot of division and lots of changes in theology. And till we sort of get this kind of modern soup of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and various interpretations on what various scriptures and even kind of thought means. Well, it could be argued that as Gnostics are even further outside of that, because we're looking at them usually from a very mystical and trying to be insightful meaning and content on kind of what is being said within those scriptures. You know, we are definitely not literalists. We're not looking at scriptures in a fundamentalist way, grasping on every word and looking at them saying, well, this is exactly what this means. No, I think we tend to be more open for debate, tend to be more open for a conversation. And I think that it is through conversation that things can be, you know, really open up not only other people's eyes, but help to open up our own eyes.
Absolutely.
It is, you know, when anger and hostility and those kind of emotions come into play that really debate starts becoming no good. But if we can kind of keep a level head, open up discussion and dialogue, those things I think can be promising not only for the person we're having the discussions with, but also for ourselves.
Absolutely.
You know, many times I walk away from a conversation going, wow, I just learned something new about myself.
Yeah. Yep.
You know,
and there has to be that willingness to self-examine. And some people, I think, they come into a faith movement or a church or a group and they say, okay, I've found it, here I am, and that's where they stay, and there's no longer any sort of self-observation or self-examination. And
right.
that can sometimes result in people developing a very rigid worldview, a very rigid faith that is not open to the Spirit.
I have to agree with you 100% of that.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, how I would, I guess, have to try to summarize all of this. As a Gnostic, when they say, do we have itchy ears? Do we have itchy ears? I would say to a certain degree, yes, we have itchy ears. You know, we have itchy ears. We want to hear what we find true within ourselves. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that if we're looking for that God within and looking for that voice of God and trying to find God's voice talking to us so we can manifest the will of God, that we have to do what's true to our nature. I think, though, the problem arises is then when we're really kind of putting other things in and not truly listening to that voice of God. We're letting false teachers, we're letting other people's opinions kind of slip into there. And I think that is probably the toughest thing for any of us, whether you're Gnostic, whether you're an evangelical, whether you're Roman Catholic, whether you're Greek Orthodox, is staying true to that kind of inner voice of God within and not having the distractions of the world around us. And you know, I think that's one of the kind of the keys to Gnosis is listening to that voice and be able to discern that truth.
And I think that you make a good point about, you know, being able to listen to the voice of God. And I would just say from a slightly different perspective that I would be looking at what I can observe and see in myself, and then I can perhaps compare and contrast what my spoken religious beliefs are. And are those religious beliefs justifying my current state? Are they justifying or are they accommodating my own proclivities? Are they my own dysfunctions? And if I can draw some correspondences there, maybe I can see where my so-called religious beliefs or spiritual practices are justifying my own brokenness and bad behaviors or sinful nature, I guess I would say. And might be at a position where I could start to work on that, and that may be a point where there's going to be some spiritual evolution taking place.
I think all very, very good points. You know, this is definitely a topic that I don't think we're going to be able to cover in our allotted time. And it's something that I think would definitely need to be kind of looked at for kind of, you know, future reference and further discussion. I would really like to see if others make comments on the video on our YouTube channel and maybe at a later date kind of reopen this and take a look and and kind of had further discussions. Is there any exciting news or any news that you think that we need to be discussing with our viewers right now?
Well, first of all, I know that you and I are both really excited to be here, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know our viewership and, of course, increasing viewership. So, what we do ask, obviously, is that if you give us some feedback, email and social media. You can find us on our YouTube channel. You can send us a message there in the comments section. Talk Gnosis at GnosticNYC.com is an email that you can write to us at, but we're definitely interested in hearing from you about the show.
Absolutely.
And this has been a production of Gnostic NYC. If you enjoyed this show, we do ask that you share it with your friends, that you click on our like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, the opinions on this program do not necessarily represent the views of Gnostic NYC or any organization. No animals were harmed during the production of this show. And for more Talk Gnosis, tune in live every Wednesday night for a new episode. Take care.
Well, thank you very much. See you all
Thank
next
you.
week.
Okay.